Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravilapayan Sanmatram Anandaganam Vibhavayam Samahita Sanbahirantaram Va Kalam Niyetaha Sati Karma Bande Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Brahman is an indeterminable mass of pure conscious awareness. And therefore, taking what is external and what is internal, render them into one indivisible state. Then meditate upon that state, pass your time contentedly, and be free. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vacham Nyachatmani Tam Nyacham Buddhau Diyam Yachacha Buddhi Sakshini Tam Chapi Nirvikalpe Vilapya Shantim Paramam Bhajasva. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. The practitioner of blissful dissolution joins the word to the mind, and the mind to the intellect to the ego to the witness to the Atman, and the Atman to Brahman. Brahman is the soul in all. In this way does the meditator experience eternal peace and unalloyed bliss. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, and may Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So we have all gathered here at our Badrinath ashram in Hawaii on the Big Island. And we are getting ready to enter into our second and final class of Shankara's spiritual brilliance. Last Sunday at this time, you remember that we went through his lineage, and I left a chart here just so we can have a remembering glance at it. And we also looked at all the scriptures that he wrote, at least most all of them. I didn't put all the stotrams up there. I did put a couple of them, like Mohamudgara, the hammer that relentlessly pounds away at ignorance, also known popular as Bhajavavindam. And so that we remember what we did last week and connected that to a few of the experiences of his life. And we'll do more of that today, hopefully with more of the accent on what his life was like in 32 years there in the subcontinent of India. And he went around establishing the 4 mats, and as we looked at last time, beings like Hastam Malakacharya and so forth had left 4 of his most qualified students at each of these 4 mats, while sometimes even while he walked away from them and went and visited other towns and cities in India, like Varanasi. And then sometimes he'd send for them, and they'd walk across long distances to get to him. It was back there a lot of walking on on the legs and feet of mendicants and sannyasins in that case, reestablishing holy places, not just the four main ones, but taking dives into icy waters to, after meditating, to find out where certain images that had been worshipped in the temple had been thrown by the Buddhists when they were there, desecrated the temples. So he would recover them, bring them back up, sometimes himself with these deep dives, and bring these images to shore. They'd set them back up on the temples in the cities and towns, and people would come and start worshipping again. So he was not just an Advaitin in that sense. Well, essentially he was, but he was also having an eye out for all the people at different levels of understanding. Advaita, or dualism, being very important to them. Because the path of Bhakti Yoga is very important. Even Sri Ramakrishna said that in this day and age in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, that that's Bhakti Yoga is the path for the age, and might not be in agreement with some meditators or with some jnanis, but they are in agreement that it is for the masses. Maybe they have found another path which they course along, and it's more suited to their temperaments, because we need to have those kinds of beings who are familiar with and having concourse with formless reality, so that the samadhis are pronounced as they are in the Advaitic scriptures. So it's good to be speaking about this to all of you today, especially on Mother's Day, because Shankara had his darshan with Mother in form. He had blessing in vision by the Divine Mother, and even had debate with her once, and she appeared in the form of a very intelligent woman and had to admit defeat in a certain sense, that all wisdom belongs to the Mother. And so it's a very important thing. He also wrote some stotrams and commentaries to her, on her and to her, when he commented on, as we said last week, some of the tantras, and like his teacher's teacher, Gaudapada, did also, commented on tantras. So it wasn't just the Brahma Sutras, which were so important to Advaita Vedanta, or just the Gita, which is also incredibly important work that he commented on, but it's also these other works that probably aren't as well known to us in the West, maybe even to Indian philosophers who are following the course of traditional Vedanta as a darshana, one of the 6 darshanas. So on Mother's Day, it's good to, as we salute our own manifestation of the Divine Mother in this age, Sri Sharda Devi, Holy Mother, whose image stands right here before us in our temple, in which we worship with deep devotion all the time, to connect that to this path that's sometimes been called Shakta Advaita Vada. That is the path that combines the non-dual Advaita with the great darshana of Shaktism, worship of Divine Mother. In a sense, it shouldn't have to be a path that we uncover like our founder Lexiksen and myself did in India when we visited there when we were younger, and found that there was a word to this path that we were following. Some people are trying to call it Ramakrishna Vedanta, but I know my guru didn't like that term that much. But Shakta Advaita Vada seemed to fit it very well. Is that you know that all wisdom comes from Divine Mother power, and every word is impregnated with meaning by her, and she's the secret in all the mantras. And all the seers remember her as the imperishable Shakti, the perfect I consciousness, existing in all things, in all the abundance of words that flow out of the mouths of the seers and so forth. That's Mantranam, Jiva Bhuta, Tulya Smrita, Shakti Rupaya is how they put that in the tantras. That they'll remember her as that one intelligent principle of Advaitic understanding that flows through all words, all scriptures. So that keeps them very much in the know, on the cutting edge of her sword of discriminatory wisdom and revelatory wisdom too. So that's why, speaking of the 4 main direct disciples of Shankara, we have the 16 direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna too. One of them wrote once, Devim prasanam pranatarti hantrim yogindra pujam jugadharma patram tam sharadam bhakti vijnana datram daya swarupam pranamami nityam. O Mother, propitious Goddess, killer of misery and souls resigned, Savior of religion in every age, by saints and sages worshipped, O Mother kind. Give us bhakti vijnana, give us love and devotion, Thou, O grace incarnate, to Thee we bow, wrote Swami Abhedananda Maharaj in his Prakritim Paramam Stotram to Divine Mother in this very day and age, very recently. So this is Shakti Advaita Vada at its best, you might say, and people are becoming more and more aware of it as it becomes accented and pronounced, as it was back in Shankara's time too. He was bringing that out of cover, and it's very difficult to do in a male-dominated society, particularly. But as we said last week, Sri Ramakrishna said, one ray of wisdom from the Divine Mother stuns 1,000 scholars. So those ones that wake up and know that that's Mother Wisdom coming out of them, then they can connect it to her, and their wisdom becomes a matter of transformative power for others. And their words carry great weight. That's where you see people getting impressed by it, whereas you can hear 1,000 lectures by someone who hasn't that connection to Divine Mother, and it doesn't seem to be making much of a dent on their egos, getting in very, very deeply. As if taking refuge in Divine Mother is the way to open up. Any ego that hasn't taken refuge in Divine Mother becomes kind of dangerous to itself and to others. Even good egos are like that. You see, they change quickly. People are very volatile and don't know their own minds. So when one establishes oneself in the truth, then it's like Shankara has said, and commentators have also said. I did find that section I was looking for last week about the province of the enlightened. Shankara's illumined guru's guru, Gaudapada, talks about Advaita that way. He says, the disputes among the followers of different schools, this commentator, Svayam Prakasha was his name, he compares that to the barkings of a dog at its own reflection in a hall of mirrors. So the disciple is taught there is no use in disputation. Advaita means non-quarrel. Let one first acquire faith in the teacher and the teaching. It is this which will lead one to perfection. And also other stories are used, like the man who, deprived of his nose at birth, went about preaching, "Lo, you may behold the heavenly worlds if you cut off your nose. Come, follow me and enjoy looking at these wonderful words, these wonderful worlds." And others may have followed him, but they only got disappointed. So this is the way they describe the difference between Advaita Vedanta, which is the atmosphere of non-dispute. It's as if you come to know it, all other paths are fine. But they tend to think that a dog barking at its own reflection in a house of mirrors applies to materialistic views, like our science, and like Charvaka school in India, materialistic school. So they're all welcome to their own view, but when one comes to understand non-duality, it's just obvious that this is the truth, and there's no disputation or debate necessary from there anymore. One just goes about in possession of that knowledge. I would say this is accented many-fold if you connect it to the Wisdom Mother, as an object of worship, object of deification, as an ideal that you have, like the Shaktas do. And that gives it double the power, brings Advaita out, and brings Mother out from hiding too, sometimes. So we'll see that. Maybe I'll read a couple of stories of that, those instances of Shankara's life where he had vision of Divine Mother as he was just walking about. And she all of a sudden appeared to him in different circumstances. So on Mother's Day, and with that, all of that said, we can pick up the trail from our last class. And you all remember we had a chart up alongside this one that was called The Secret of the Scriptures. If you remember them, we probably can boil them down to 4 or 5. One of them was the secret of para and apara vidya. There's a lower knowledge, which is our secular sciences and our arts and crafts and our topics in schools and professions that earn our living and so forth. But we don't really have any para vidya after that. Even religion seems to fall in the pale of a para vidya here. And it runs the risk of losing any depth to it, or even sometimes its faith. But they have, one of the secrets of the scriptures is that there's this paravidya, that once you satisfy work, gain knowledge from it, and then there's what's called higher knowledge, or paravidya, supreme knowledge, which is knowledge of your relationship of yourself with the Supreme Being, and the conclusion that there's no difference in the end. And that's the line drawn on water, rather than the stick placed over the water. The stick causes, for a long time, causes the appearance of 2 bodies of water, but the line, just for a few seconds, causes the appearance of 2 and then disappears. So those ripe egos are those lines drawn on water, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said. And they quickly do away with the appearance of 2 all the time. And then they can stay in that rare province of the enlightened. That's where they stay all the time, prefer to stay there. They've mastered the ability to stay there. We could just call that yoga in its purest form, the purest form of the word yoga. So we had that teaching in the Secret of the Scriptures on the chart that was right here. And then we had the teaching of the 4 kinds of interpretations of the Scriptures. 1, that they just come from mankind's mind, and 2, they come from the best intellects, and 3, they come from the seers, or a combination of those 2, and then it comes from Ishvara, 3, and then 4, that it doesn't come at all. It's just the scriptures are always there, these revealed scriptures, and one needs to just go looking for them each lifetime. And we had that on good record that Shankara did look for them and found them at about 5 years of age. Talk about making the most of your time and bringing everything to a focal point. And then when he started getting teachings of them from the family guru, he remembered them all right away by the time he was 8. So he had already done them before. They were in the background of his mind. And all he had to do was brush a few pebbles off, and there was the gold of the scriptures shining forth, as Sri Ramakrishna said. So, and then he would appear to his teacher later, we'll get into that, appear to Govindapada later and just amaze people. I mean, you'd have to imagine a 12-year-old boy walking up to you shining with light in knowledge of all the scriptures of India, and being able to satisfy any question you had at such a tender young age. What an impression that made on old yogis, old rishis, and old practitioners that were hanging around caves that he found his teacher in, Govindapada. Beautiful stories. So you'd have to use your powers of envisionment, to try and feel what it would be like to meet a soul like that, particularly a young one. What an impression that would make on you. So this would be where one of the greatest interpretations of the scriptures comes forth from, is that it has no origin. It's non-originated, like everything else. If everything else is unoriginated, why shouldn't the scriptures be even more so? So they're present in your heart all the time, but you haven't made connection to your heart center yet. You're still influenced by the three lower centers: eating, drinking, sex, life, progeny, making a living, and all this. So if you open to that heart center, then all of a sudden you see them shining there. And you see the seeds to them too. And Tattva Bodha was one of the scriptures that he wrote about, so that we know about fives and insentient principles that through which the intelligent consciousness made its way, which I'll show you in a second, how it makes its way to Earth. That would be the knowing about the tattvas. But then, of course, knowing about Jnanam is entirely different than that. And it's knowing about Jnanam is entirely different than yoga practice too. As I think we read that last week, or did we? I'm not sure. That it has been read recently in SRV, and as people with practitioners with leftover samskaras still that haven't purified their mind completely need to engage in yoga practice. But the pure-minded ones don't. They just can understand the Vedanta the first time they hear it. So you'd have to put that in terms of knowledge of revealed scriptures existing in Shankara at a very young age. Probably, it's not a matter of abortion or non-abortion that they are fighting about in the earth nowadays. It's a matter of long before the soul was even conceived. Conception didn't start at the time. Consciousness didn't start at the time of conception. That's all physical in mother's womb. It's living outside. Inside would be a better way of putting it. Before the fetus is even conceived of, before the parents even get together to have union, that soul is waiting there. So some of those souls are waiting for the right auspicious time, and others are just by accident almost stumbling out into the womb and into the earth. Alpameda, Krishna says, no intelligence in them. But some souls like Shankara we'd have to use to raise the bar on that. You see, this is really an exceptional soul. One of his disciples walked on water once to save him, to help him. So these things were going on with these miraculous beings as recent as 700 AD when they lived. So, secrets of the scriptures, the three proofs of truth, Shravana, Manana, and Nidhyasana was another one on that chart, sometimes called Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhava. So if you can envision that chart, which had Shankara and all his disciples sitting around him, and all of these secrets of the scriptures that put scriptures in an entirely different atmosphere and category than the way we look at them. Oh, I have to go do my Bible study or something, you see. But to know that the scriptures are unoriginated, and that there's such a thing as revealed scriptures, and that they have no origin, that they're eternal, and that you get to them by hearing about them from the lips of an illumined soul, meditating on them with your own mind and realizing them, and then bringing them into your life. All of these things are taken very seriously in the realm of Shruti. To be heard, Shruti means. These are to be heard every lifetime. The first thing you ought to hear is that, if you can possibly manage it. So it puts birth, rebirth, all on an entirely different footing for the practitioner, aspirant, seeker, devotee, and then on another level for the Jnani or the Vijnani. So we looked at that chart, and then putting this chart up close to it, let's wait and see what we get here, but I want to remind you that we were putting Shankara's life in his early life, which we've talked about enough, I think, to get an idea. Number 2 phase was as he was a wandering monk. He finally got sannyas at 12. His mother let him go to get sannyas. Remember the story of the crocodile and how he elicited from his mother her permission for him to take sannyas and then left. That's started the second phase, wandering life. Then came his disciplehood to Govindapada when he found his guru. And then came his period as a youthful teacher, very young teacher in his 20s, going about India and writing all his great commentaries. That was his master debater and writer of commentators period. And then finally it began to define what they called his spiritual campaign, and how he established the 4 mutts in the 4 pilgrimage places of India, to which this day, some 1,300 years later, people are continually going around India visiting those as a matter of yearly practice, as a matter of pilgrimage. And so that's what we have to cover today. That's really way too much to cover. But we could say that we've gone through his early life enough so that we have an idea of that. Let's take it up from his wandering monk period then. So he went looking for his guru after he left home at 12. His home was in Kerala, basically. And we don't see him next until Narmada River, where Govindapada, who was the incarnation of the father of yoga, was up in a cave. Very hard to get into that cave because the floods and the earthquakes and stuff had closed it down with boulders, and they had to remove certain boulders with the village people to be able to get into him. And then you could very squeeze through this. And Govindapada was sitting there in samadhi. He had been in samadhi for, they don't know how long, maybe years, in a very high state of mind. And when he came out of samadhi, when Shankara entered that cave and saw this 12-year-old boy there, he realized that's why he had been keeping the body for that many years. He could have just given it up in samadhi, but he had been waiting for his student to come. And so when that happened, I mean, there are pictures of it that artists have drawn, and I think there's one of them on one of my charts. In fact, did I even have that with me? Might be good to take a look at that since it's come up. Is it the third one? Yes, there you are. So you see here's one artist's rendition of going into the cave and seeing him, Shankara, the young boy, coming through this very narrow opening of the cave, and Govindapada coming out of samadhi and recognizing the shining lad as who he was waiting for. Sort of like when Ramakrishna saw Naren for the first time, Swami Vivekananda for the first time, very young, in his teens, and put him through tests. Are you the soul that came with me, beyond Maya? Beautiful songs about that, which are crowding in my mind right now. But are you the soul that we talked about coming to Earth? Since Maya was so thick, Sri Ramakrishna had to make sure that Naren was that one that had come. And so touched him, put him in a state, asked him questions and so forth. So it's kind of the same thing, Shishya-Guru relationship that's been going on for countless millennia. For time out of mind, really, in this the most valued relationship in all of life by Indian standards. The seers value that. And the most, that relationship. So there was reference to that. We'll get to that because that's actually what I imposed over that was the difference between Patanjali's yoga and what Shankara commented on. Patanjali's yoga is 8-limbed, and when Shankara got through commenting on it, it was 14-limbed. So you can see how he filled in some of the gaps. Was it because Patanjali had left him out? No, I mean, they probably lived a good 500-600 years apart from each other, as far as we can tell, historically speaking. So that was, even Shankara realized at 12 that even though he had recalled all the scriptures, most of them, he needed a teacher. So I mean, if great souls like that need teachers, then shouldn't we follow suit and find ourselves a good, authentic teacher that can help us recover our inherent wisdom? Point us in the right direction so that we can do that. So he heard that Patanjali had taken a body, and this is how it came down to Shankara when he wondered, because when they wander in India, they wander amidst monks. They don't, they might go through towns and have a little bit of truck with ordinary people. Basically, their stations are, where's the next place where monks gather? Where's the next place where monks gather? And that's the way they go. Like outside of Kamarpukur, when Sri Ramakrishna was a boy, he used to go outside and see them gather outside his village, and he'd spend the night with them out there, lighting their fires and bringing them food and so forth, getting wood. And so they weren't going into the towns, and they were just, around their Duni fires. And their holy fires every night was a very important thing with certain rituals, and then they'd feel like they were in a sacred atmosphere. So Shankara found out that Patanjali had taken a body. He didn't find out that there was some man named Govindapada somewhere. He found out that Patanjali had taken a body. Father of Yoga was actually in the body again. And he said, well, that would make a good teacher, wouldn't it? Wouldn't he? And he found out that he was calling himself Govindapada. Now, Govindapada has, how many different meanings for that? It's a very important word. That's why Father of Yoga took it, because Govinda starts it out. So there's like 5, 6 different very important definitions for Govindapada. I mean, like, he who controls the senses, to the one who has free access to all wisdom. So you have to take apart the word, as in Sanskrit, any word has huge, deep meaning. So he was calling himself Govindapada, and his credential was, well, he was the disciple of Gaudapada. And of course that spoke volumes, even in Shankara's time, so that he would then become known as the disciple of Gaudapada, the great enlightened. You might say that maybe it was Shankara's business and prerogative to establish the Advaita Vedanta, but it was set up by Gaudapada and others before Shankara came on the scene. Just like Sri Ramakrishna was set up, his birth was set up by many other factors, Divine Mother factors, we would call them. Now, let's look at disciplehood. I mean, that's part of this thing called wandering monk, the sannyasin, we're calling it here. After waking Govindapada out of samadhi, Govindapada taught him Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, the three of those yogas that he needed further schooling in, and he mastered them each in 1 year. And he did it through the method of the 3 proofs of truth, or the 3 great principles of understanding Scripture: Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Let's look at that then, since it's come up at this point. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. And this chart, because it'll lead well into this later. We've already covered this in a sense in another way last week. But if you can see in this chart the important points of how a teacher like Govindapada would school somebody as advanced as Shankara. What do you do with a boy like that, kind of thing? So he's Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana is there. So Shravana, to hear the truth; Manana, to contemplate the truth; and Nididhyasana, to realize the truth. Or I was calling it here on this chart, Hirsi. First you hear it, then you see it, then you be it, because you are it, in a sense. So those 3 shells down there are echoing. It's like you'll put a shell up to your ear and you'll hear that primal sound inside of it. So there you see a great eye there and a great ear, to hear, to see, and to actually become what you are, to realize that you are that, or that thou art, tat tvamasi. So to hear the truth, You might say, I can just walk into a room, but remember the story of picking up a pigeon and feeding it some corn and peas, but they just get stuck in the craw and don't get digested. So many teachers have complained about that. Like Holy Mother would say, where's the competent student? Like one of her very pregnant sayings. Sparsity of words, but and those beings who have tried to teach or find competent students for something as high a level as Advaita Vedanta really can commiserate with her when she said that and can understand what she means. So it's not just that you can walk in somewhere, hear it, and walk away, like maybe we would do in the West with a class in college or something, so to pass a course or to understand on the intellectual level. It would be more like hear it from an illumined preceptor who's grounded in the tradition and has practiced it, like Govindapada would be to Shankara. I mean, if Shankara is looking for a teacher, he's going to have to find a very high level of teacher to be able to school him, because he's looking at graybirds who don't know anywhere near what he knows. He's only 12. You can imagine the predicament. So he's going to have to find a very highly qualified, fully realized soul who can transmit not only mere things like Hatha Yoga, which has just a nominal use, which Shankara himself kind of panned later, and but to be taught the Raja Yoga, be taught the Jnana Yoga, that gets higher and higher as you go along. So you're going to have a teacher who can do that. So hear it from an illumined preceptor grounded in the tradition. Not just somebody that you pick up hitchhiking. Says, I know something, here, listen. Or you're on the beach here in Hawaii and somebody comes up and says, here, I'll talk to you about such and such. It's very rare that would happen, particularly in the West, that you would find anyone competent to teach you such high things. Even in India, it's rather rare. There's a teaching of Sri Aurobindo, who found his guru on the train, knew him all of like a couple hours train ride, got initiated from him and never saw him again. So these are souls that are sort of like this pair. They're meeting on earth just for that particular preordained rule and mission, to get it done with, and then to fan the flames of realization and to go help the world. But probably even more importantly, once you find that teacher, then listen with an open heart and a pure mind. That is, with your intelligence present and intact. Not falling out, as you would do in grade school or something, looking out the window, imagining, falling asleep, whatever it is. You have to have your intelligence intact and your mind open and your heart ready to receive. These are more secrets of Shravana. I mean, you've got a 3-point secret here that has secrets inside of it, how to go about it. Hear it to know both the outer and inner meaning, because we're only listening to the outer meaning for certain worldly reasons or earthly reasons. But the inner meaning escapes us, like Mother being present in all the words, in all the statements of the scriptures, and in the statements of the seers who have realized all these scriptures that we've looked at. Because on the chart we had here, that we looked at last week, we had all of Shankara's state scriptures, but here's a whole list of other scriptures. I mean, his are listed right there, some of them, but there's a whole bunch of other ones that you're going to have to pay attention to. And then here's an important point. Hear it for purposes of enlightenment. Why are you there with the teacher? Is it, to head the row? Is it out of pride? Is it out of something to do? Sort of like to see if it can sustain itself. Like one person told me just yesterday, well, I see if my spiritual life was sustainable. I just rolled my eyes. That's inside the world, to see what my worldly prospects are then. And if my spiritual life can be sustained inside of that, then I'll take it. Otherwise, I'll pan it. So you're not putting it first. You're not putting God first and mammon later. Which is even a teaching of just dualistic religion, to speak of Advaita. So here they want you to hear those teachings for the purposes of enlightenment. And that's the main reason. See? Danur Grihitva Upanishadam Mahastram, the great Upanishads. Sharam Yuta Sanasita Samyayita Ayamya Tad Bhavakatena Chetasa, intelligence. Laksham Tadevaksharam Somya Vidhi. O shining youth, you should hear this nectar of enlightenment from an enlightened teacher. After having taken the Upanishads like a weapon, fastened to them the arrow of your mind, which has been made sharpened by thoughts of Brahman only, then aim, pull full strength, release, penetrate the mark, which is what? The imperishable Brahman. The imperishable Brahman, Akhanda Satchidananda. You want this to be your only reason for sitting and taking the trouble and time to go deep in these 5 ways we just said. These 4 ways. The 5th way is hear it with a view to inform others about it, and finally hear it to destroy ignorance for all time, so it doesn't come back on you. It didn't come back on Shankara because he had gone to his last lifetime and probably lifetimes previously having memorized all of those things. Like my teacher, Swami Sheshananda Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him, being able to recite the whole Gita in Sanskrit and English when he was in his 90s. So, that's some time he put into that, and it's going to go with him past death, and it's going to come back with him as he take another lifetime. And he used to just recite it as we took prasad, just run the slokas in his memory, while we ate prasad that he had turned into pure food. So these stick with you if you place them in the mind and contemplate them. We're getting to the contemplation part. This is just the hearing part. So look back on those 6 things. Now let's go. We've gone through this. It is rather a new chart. Basically, I think it's numbered 253 out of 350. So it's not that old of a chart. We haven't gone through it that much. Remember, we're studying what? The 3 proofs of truth, that after waking Govindapada out of Samadhi, Govindapada taught him these yogas, and he mastered each one in a year using this method. Okay, just to reiterate that. Having based on the revealed scriptures and their secrets, which we looked at last week, then based upon his scriptures he wrote and his Advaitic lineage. See how putting it all together like that gives you the full picture of how to walk a path, to say the least, in India. How serious they consider their philosophies and their religion. It's all of life to them. In fact, it's eternal life. That's what dharmic and eternal life or divine life is. Otherwise, it's not life, and it's not worth living. It doesn't amount to anything in the end. And they have teachings about that too: samsara, maya, suffering, so forth. So now, manana. This just has 5 points. After you've heard it, subject it to the testimony of the seers. So like Shankara could have been a prideful, arrogant little brat. I know everything. You bow to me now. What's he thinking? I want to wonder. I want to find my teacher. And I want to spread this to the world. I have a mission, and so forth. I'm on a mission from Brahman. This is the Orange Brothers, not the Blues Brothers. Measured against who the scriptures declare. You see, that is what the scriptures declare. So, seers and scriptures, right? Guru, Abhivesha. That's another one of the secrets of the scriptures. I think there's one I didn't mention. Is that you have Guru Anushasana and Vidya Shastra. Make sure you take recourse to what the seers said and how they wrote it down in the revealed scriptures. That's something you have an option to do in India. I would say that it's really hard to find revealed scriptures in other religions, unless you really go into the background, the mystics of other religions. You might be able to find them. But if they are held secret, sort of on purpose there, I think. So you don't strew pearls before swine kind of thing. You wait for people to be qualified so that they'll understand them and won't do them injustice. Because if you're going to teach them to others, then you have to make sure to have that kind of integrity around them. So subject it, that is truth, to the testimony of the seers and measure it against the scriptures. Then discuss it daily with the spiritual preceptor. If you're fortunate, if you have one standing by, like the teaching of the Tibetan man who dies, and he just happens to have a Rinpoche up the street that he knows. So Rinpoche can walk a few blocks and help him die, to lead him to the light. So he passes away, and his teacher, they have a relationship, and he says, see the light? Go to it. And this is after the man's already passed. See, he's talking to the transmigrating soul of that old man who has just left the body and is hanging around the atmosphere. You can't see him. I'm sorry, it's called a subtle body. But it's hanging around, his energy and his thoughts, his mental complex is hanging around, and the Guru sees it by closing his eyes, just and kiss the Rinpoche, and he starts guiding him towards the Buddha light. Hopefully he can make it within 7 days. If not, maybe he can make the Shambhala worlds of, depending on which Tibetan school you're talking about, within 14 days. If that's not possible, then, take a human birth, not an animal birth, after 21 days. So all of these things are well outlined in Tibetan Buddhism that came out of India. It came from India via Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, and down to the robed one, the single robed one, Milarepa. That's an important point. Discuss it daily with your preceptor if you're so fortunate as to have one around for something as high as all of this, what to speak of Advaita. Then refine it with ongoing worship and meditation. And that's a part of, you'd think that would be part of the nididhyasana almost, but it really is contemplation meditation. It's really what manana is about. I like to teach it that, you hear it, you reflect on it, and then you take it in the mind, roll it over manana, and then you meditate on it. And so all of that kind of forms a 3 or 4 composite level of practice that you're willing to do. Most people it escape them over their heads because they sit down and shut their eyes, they go to sleep, see. Or they sit down and shut their eyes and they nap, or they sit down and shut their eyes and say, is this all there is? See? Like the joke about the 2 monks sitting next to each other. Box after box goes by the cartoon. They're just all sitting there. Finally, one comes out and says, "Is this all there is? We're just supposed to sit here with our eyes closed?" So something deeper has to happen in meditation. And if you're unsure about that, let's go back. What is it? We have to keep our hearts and minds open. We have to be seeking enlightenment. We have to keep our intelligence with us and intact, our consciousness with it. We have to be on vigil, and we have to want to destroy our ignorance so that we don't fall asleep again. And so, all of this, you have to bring it back and keep reminding yourself until the mind gets trained. So refine it with ongoing worship and meditation, because we want to get to some other aspects of Shankara's life. We're going through this rather quickly. Perceive it as the internal voice of the Vakdevi. So that's why I'm adding that into the mananas. So if you see it as her wisdom, your ego will die, because you won't try and own the wisdom anymore. And then you can be observant of it and wait for her to raise it in you. And everything that went before, have been coffin nails in the graveyard of ignorance. So you're putting sleep to sleep forever, as my teacher used to say. You're putting death in its own grave. He would try to explain this to us in different ways. making fear afraid of itself. Whatever your problem is, pull a march on it, turn it on its end. Now, Nididhyasana is to refine consciousness and raise it up higher and higher centers. You're not going to be resting on your laurels, you might say. And, I've gone this far. It didn't look like Shankara, as far as he had come, was doing that. He was going to go find a teacher, and he was going to write commentaries. He was going to establish mats. He was going to resurrect the Dharma and try and teach a few close-in disciples what Advaita meant. Confirm all results with ongoing spiritual practice. So you never call yourself a master, as Sri Ramakrishna said. Don't call me a master. That pricks my flesh like a thorn. It assumes or pre-assumes that I don't have any, that there's a limit to spiritual knowledge, and there isn't. I've found out there isn't. You just keep going. So you, as Shankara was later to say, to have the best view of non-duality and Mother Wisdom, I have to polish the mirror of my mind every day. So he wasn't just hanging around waiting for dust to collect on a very vast mind already. I mean, the vaster his mind, the more polishing you might have to do. It's like having one whole wall of your house a window, so you're going to take you a long time to dust that window every day. And of course, to be an example to others. Transform life in the world and body into the light of this very truth. This is a part of the Nididhyasana Triputi here. It says you want to bring this full circle. You're getting ready for Shankara, what they call the fourth level of this teaching. It's where you bring it all back full circle into life, as he was doing. Be open to non-dual truth and stages of successive samadhi. You don't celebrate spiritual experiences, Zen says. You see, you just note them and then get a pat on the back from your Roshi and say, now forget that one and go on. You see. And I was thinking about that one day, and I made up my own analogy for it. As the man comes out of the wilderness, wet, cold, lost, and he's been that way for days, and he comes out on a road, and on the road there's a sign that says civilization 8 miles. So he, instead of going to civilization, he clings to the sign. It's the first sign of humanity that he's seen, so he can't let it go. So that's the way I would say that clinging to your spiritual experiences rob you from having arrival at a particular level of understanding. In this case, a very high one. Penultimately, then, meditate on non-dual reality with karma gunas until karma gunas and forms disappear. So you are looking for something formless and beyond action and inaction, and beyond modes of nature, gunas, and beyond unmanifested prakriti. Like tattva bodha, knowledge of principles, and unmanifested prakriti are really two different teachings. Unmanifested prakriti is the whole shooting match of where things come from that are insentient, and how these get projected by the mind. So that's a very high level of transcendence, where you can go beyond certain fives, even the fourfold mind. But it's very difficult to get beyond unmanifested prakriti. It's right there tucked up to the purusha. The two are right next to each other. And two avenues are going out for them. One, how the insentient moves or doesn't move, as the case may be, and one, how sentient consciousness uses that to fashion the worlds and move through them. So this is going to be important there. Then finally, realize the identity of the apparent self with the Atman. And that was probably in your mind way back when they first told you about Advaita Vedanta. It's going to be where the apparent self disappears into the true self. Shankara said, like a hailstone falling in an ocean. I used to have that sloka memorized. I'll have to look that up again. But where the hailstone falls and merges itself in the ocean. So basically, here's Shankara's own definition of this. There is no other means for control of mental states except the knowledge of the self and the train of remembrance about it. Smriti rupena ya krishnam etat vyapyastatadjagat namastasyai namastasyai namastasyai. So smriti rupena, the knowledge of all forms of knowledge. Now this is a chant to the Divine Mother. So in the Chandi, smriti rupena ya etat vyapyastatadjagat namastasyai namastasyai. So then he says about nididhyasana is not a means to liberation. Knowledge of the self must already be present for nididhyasana to occur. So that's where Satyakara or Turiya, beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, you think you've gotten to understand a lot of this. You've connected the A to the U to the M, but there's still the Shvara to deal with. And then what's beyond the Shvara? Amrita Bindu, Amrita Nada Upanishad talks about that. We'll see that in Portland in a few weeks. And so, retrieving the senses of hearing from the cacophony of common talk and verbiage, turning the two eyes inwards towards singular sight, rescuing the mind from the throng of endless and hopeless worldly activity, these are the requisites for the threefold powerful practice that transforms one's being and ushers it into the ocean-like depths of breathless peace, purest understanding, and non-dual awareness, said some person. So this is a conclusion about the whole Here See Be teaching, how Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana works. And we took that 20-minute or 25-minute detour, which is a good one, in order to accent the point that this is how Shankara was learning from Govindapada. This is how the secret of the scriptures are remembered and used from time out of mind. Lord Brahma will be the first one to remember this, the Trinity. These are powerful seeds, like bijams. Om, Aim, Hrim, Shrim, Krim, Klim, Hum, Vat, Swaha. These are like words that are planted deep in the cosmic mind. And yes, they can produce. The production is kind of projection. And it does have a shelf life and then get withdrawn. And all of that triputi, preservation, sustenance, and withdrawal is going on all the time. But holding those words of power, those seeds of power, and the knowledge of how things proceed at the behest of the Vakdevi, the power of the word, is what's important. And so they'll keep that with them at all times, in any lifetime. And that very presence is, as it said here, is how Shankara remembered everything so quickly. It's become rule of thumb to him, to all the seers. And it's like as soon as they open their eyes on this world, they see suffering, and then they see the truth. Then they remember the route to truth. And they choose it and walk it. And it's really that simple. Those who don't, God save them. And God save us from them. Because those are our ancestors and family, and they're following that wending way. See? Once one of my old teachers of music said, "Oh, I haven't seen you for years. What are you into? Vedanta. Why are you into that?" So forth. And then he said, "Well, I've written a book. And here it is." And he said, "My wending way." So I thought, that kind of sounds like whining your way pointlessly through life. I hope it ends somewhere, rather than just music for the sake of the pleasure of the ears. You see. Disciplehood, that was actually the sixth point as we looked at this wandering monk phase. Then he saved his guru from drowning during a flood. But do I have a page number for that? 42. And this coverless book of Advaita wisdom that I keep pulling out probably has you all wondering, what is that? The rain set in Omkarnath, Nice word for a town, huh? Name, Omkarnath. And the Narmada River was all around. The rains were unusually heavy that year. Remember, he's walked from Kerala, southern India, farthest part, all the way inland to Omkarnath now, near the Narmada River. They walked all the time and covered great distances. That's how Buddhism spread. It's by mendicants walking the world. The rains were heavy that year. Waters swelled. The banks were submerged. The whole area was a sea of water. If you've been there in India in the monsoons, you'll know what that's like. Village folk with their domestical animals moved higher to higher areas. Govindapada, whom now Shankara has found in that cave, was in danger of drowning because the waters were reaching the level of his cave. And so all the old rishis and yogis and so forth wanted to move him, but you don't, it's the last thing you want to do is to move a yogi in samadhi. Just don't do that. It's like, what kind of equivalent in worldly life here in the West we have? Well, somebody's got a delicate heart condition and you're going to move them out of the hospital or something. You know, what's not to do? So this is what you don't do in spiritual life. And so they were in a dilemma. I'm bringing this all forward quickly. And Shankara said, don't worry, there's no need to disturb a guru in samadhi. These waters will quickly enter this jar. And he placed a jar down. And like a miracle, all the waters left the face of the cave and started running into this jar and diverted it. And they were all like astounded. Because remember, you can see a 12-year-old boy and think him to be amazing, but you don't yet believe in him. You can't. It's just not normal for the human mind to accept even an old illumined soul. People aren't accepting Dalai Lama. They didn't accept Mother Teresa. They didn't accept Mahatma Gandhi. There's so many people that maybe have, you know, some sort of wide-eyed stupor around them, but it's not like they're putting their faith in that person. And it was the same in the time of Jesus. So the monk smiled at this childishness of Shankara, felt that he was just indulging in playing with dolls. Great was his surprise to see the waters of the Narmada rushing towards the opening of the jar. And the cave was then safe, and Govindapada was safe. That's one trimmed down part of that story. Then, just before giving up the body, Govinda asked him, remember we've already gone through, and I haven't read the stories about it, but we've already gone through the fact that he got taught the Hatha Yoga, then he got taught the Raja Yoga, and then he got taught the Jnana Yoga in 3 years, 1 year each, and mastered them all. What of them he needed to know? Well, we just have to say that he was very young in the body at that time. So then Govindapada decided he'd leave the body. My work is done. And he said, he told Shankara, go to Varanasi right away. You need to be acknowledged. And when you get there, start composing commentaries on Vedavyasa's Brahma Sutras. Yeah. You know, this is how can I think of something that's equivalent to that in the Western world of science and so forth, that you would have to do something like comment on the Brahma Sutras in spiritual life at 12 years age, or by the time maybe he's 15 now. So he went to Varanasi, and they immediately proclaimed him an Amsalvatar there. All the old, venerable, learned pundits and scholars and yogis, yes, you're an Amsalvatar. And so then he took up his station in this third way, a youthful teacher. He entered his youthful teacher. He wasn't just a great shining lad who was the disciple of Gaudapada's student, Govindapada. He was now proclaimed a teacher at a very young age. It sort of reminds me of when Vivekananda went to Harvard and spoke there. And all the philosophy board there wanted to offer him a seat in foreign religion, and he didn't take it. But just based on his criterion alone of who he was, they wanted him to stay at Harvard. And, they didn't even ask for his qualifications. This is kind of what it's like to be, a sun, shining. It's like, to ask for your credentials, Swamiji, would be like asking, if the sun asking for permission to shine, is how some of the people put it in the West when he approached the Parliament of Religion. He himself was having doubts that he could speak in front of the intelligentsia of America gathered there at that Parliament, with all these people chosen from different religions. And of course, we know that story, how Sri Ramakrishna got into him and inspired him when it came time for him to talk. But before that, he was asking some of the more friendly Christian priests and fathers, but you think I should really speak here? I don't feel like I have any credentials to speak in that arena. To ask credentials of you, Swamiji, would be like the sun asking for permission to shine. Don't worry about it. Just go say what you have to say. So this is what it's like to see and believe. Hear, see, be. Some people see, they don't believe. Some people see and they believe. And hearing would be even, would be very important to that. See. Sri Ramakrishna used to say something like that. He says, it's not enough just to hear you, like over the phone. I want you to come over. You see, I need to see you. You see, then I'll understand deeper. Useful teacher. He began to get disciples at Varanasi. Sanandana was his name before Padmapada. He was one of the four, if you remember Padmapada. Was his first monastic disciple. Hasta Amalaka came later. Those are the two that took up positions of two of these four mats. So we see his life is characterized by charming childhood, precocious boyhood, sweet mother-child relationship, full-blooded student, young renunciate, adept preceptor, and total realization. This is how, after his Varanasi phase, and they looked back on his life, here's the 7 earmarks of Shankaracharya's divine incarnation as Shiva. By then he wasn't just an Amsa avatar, he was realized as a full-blown avatar. So the meaning of all this, number one, he was born to exemplify spirituality, just like Sri Ramakrishna in this age. He caused the highest good to the world and resuscitated Hindu Dharma, just like Krishna did in his time. It happens every so often. Over the long efflux of time, the Dharma, deteriorates, and then these great souls come to lift it up again. And it's like Christ saying, "I've not come to criticize or destroy the words of the old saints and so forth. I've come to resurrect them." And then that would mean taking out the sand from the sugar, like the ant does. In both the scriptures and in daily life, you'd have to exemplify both, how to do that, and show how to do it. Show how you did it. Like Manana Nidhi, Shravana Manana Nidhi Jasana, you'd have to teach this to people. Like he started teaching this, Smriti Rupranya, I started bringing out the memory of the old ways for even these old monks who were kind of lost in a daze because Buddhism had fallen and taken a toll on India. Upanishads hadn't really been talked about for a long time. People were walking the subcontinent, preaching Samkhya as the highest thing, and they weren't doing a very good job with that because you have to connect Samkhya to something. And so this was leading towards his debater commentator phase, where he had to do this with, two hands. He had to be doing one with one and the other. He had to be writing the commentaries at the same time, making sure that people remembered the true religion and did it in the right way and connected it to the scriptures and to these secrets that great souls like him would never forget. They would come back to them at birth. But other people weren't in that condition because of the times. Yuge cha dharma sha, over yugas, these things get lost. So that's point 9 and 10 into this youthful teacher phase. And one of the things that happened at that point was that he brought forth in the scriptures these four knowers of the truth of Brahman. That's of course Brahmavid, Brahmavidvara, Brahmavidvarayan, and Brahmavidvarishta. And so this is all based upon, the four qualifications of the teacher. So you'll find that in his scriptures. It would be nice, I've always said, if we had have read that before we read the Gita or before we jumped into other things. If we had have read Shankara's scriptures that had that teaching in it, how to recognize a true teacher, by sincere ability to teach and transmit, have no desire for you other than you get enlightened, and be able to transmit these teachings and live a pure, unostentatious, divinely oriented lifestyle, and become a knower of Brahman, Brahmavid. So Brahmavid kicked off from there. So these four qualifications to the teacher, then that leads you to Brahmavid. Is that the end of it? Oh, I know Brahman, that's it. No, then there's four other levels that you come to. And those are in accordance with the 7 stages of knowledge. The 4 levels of teacher the first one has 3 of these, the second one has 4, the third level has 5 or 6, and the fourth level has all 7. So Shankara was proved to be Brahmavidvarista by those living at his time and after. Just so that it imprints itself more on our mind, you can see this. Good, it has the Wisdom Mother as a backdrop there. But there you see this chart about the 4 levels of knower of Brahman and how that is, might as well call it, again, one of the secrets of the scriptures. There they are, Akamahata, Shrotriya, Avrijana, and Brahmavid in the upper left-hand corner. If your teacher has those, you can go bow at his feet, no problem. Then, of course, if it doesn't have all of those, it's time for some inspection and maybe some deeper search. If those 4 qualities are found in your authentic teacher, like we found them in Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj when in our teens, in our 20s, and Lex Hickson found them in his teacher, Swami Nikhilananda in New York, then that's a very good thing. There you see how it all comes out. 4 levels of knower of Brahman called Brahmavid, Brahmavidvaraya, Brahmavidvara, Brahmavidvaraya, and Brahmavidvarishta. And how they connect. The Brahmavid who has all of these is then has these first 4 levels of knowledge: Subhecha, Vicharana, Tanumanasa, Sattvapati. Right aspiration, detachment, knowledge of the scriptures, inherent wisdom, proper inquiry, virtue, knows the meaning and nature of Maya, contemplates Atman, peaceful-minded, free of desire, can concentrate, has mastered it, transcends the mind, and has intelligence, attains renunciation, has equality of vision, and knowledge of non-dual truth. That's just the Brahmavid, these 4. Now, if you get a teacher that has Brahmavidvaraya, or Brahmavidvara, you add in then this Asam Shakti, which is really awesome. Has things like detachment, mature detachment, has gone beyond the gunas, becomes a Jivan Mukta at that point, a living liberated soul, and is able to merge in the Atman. And that's called Asam Shakti. If you get the teacher who is at a Vidvaraya level, that's Padartha Bhavana, then add to all of that grasp of truth, that can identify with consciousness alone and sees God in everything. And these take the soul deeper and deeper into levels of consciousness that can't usually even be imagined by beginning practitioners and don't even exist for most of the world. And probably just put it that simply. If you have a Brahmavid Varishta like Shankara and like Swami Vivekananda, then Turiya gets added in there. That person abides in the self all the time, can immerse in Brahman, not just merge it and come back in and out of it, can immerse in it completely, and like Sri Ramakrishna can bring their consciousness back out of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That's not possible by most people. They'll merge and stay merged. And they rest in a disembodied state. And that's how Sri Ramakrishna found Swami Vivekananda at the 7th level of 7th chakra, resting there. Teaching beings how to get into formless samadhi. There are songs about it and stories about it. That he was resting in this disembodied state. Later, Holy Mother was to say, Naren, he stays for 700 years in a deep samadhi like a wooden statue, she said. So she knew about her great son, Swamiji, and this is when he left the body, this is what he did, disembodied state for 700 years at a time. So those give us some sort of hints as to what a Brahmavid Varishta is like, how much facility and capacity and ability they have in the realm of spirituality. Yeah, we did that quickly. The quote by Vashishta is well worth considering. The painful rounds of birth and death and ignorance will never cease until one has reached the first level of Jnana wisdom. So basically you have to have right aspiration, have detachment, knowledge of scriptures, and some inherent wisdom in you, Subecha. Then the rounds of birth and death will start to subside. A very beautiful teaching for many levels of understanding here. Clarifies, and a lot of these teachings are in Shankara's scriptures as secrets he was bringing back to the world at a time of a philosophically fallen India. This is how important he is. To attain that, seek virtue and develop indifference to the world. Then take recourse to the spiritual teachings transmitted by an illumined preceptor. Is how Lord Vashishta was talking to the young Sri Ram when he told him this, you see. Just like Govindapada was transmitting it to Shankara, and like Sri Ramakrishna was transmitting it to Narendra before he was Swami Vivekananda, all from age to age. This is what happens between Guru and Shishya, and it's inviolable. Nobody can get at it. You can't touch this. See? It's untouchable in the best of meanings of that word. So another quick sidetrack of an important kind to explain his useful teacher phase. He was declared to be Brahmavid Varishta in knowledge of all 7 stages of wisdom, including Turiya. At about this time, he had vision of Divine Mother. She granted him Brahma Drishti, constant perception of reality. Can it get any better? Why, sure. Just go to the Divine Mother if you want more. And this is where, in the remaining few minutes before our break, I would like to read a little bit about that part of his life. Good way to end the first half. One day in the very early hours, while darkness of night was still lingering, Acharya Shankara, accompanied by his disciples, was proceeding to the Manikarnika Ghat for daily ablution at dawn. You get up every morning very early, you go with your teacher, you get in the river, you hear the teachings when you get out. I mean, day after day, this is what it happens. This is the life of a wandering sannyasin. Ah, the bliss of those days. In the holy waters of the Ganges. On the way, a pathetic sight attracted his eyes. On the path leading to the river sat a young woman. She was very picture of grief. A dead body, evidently of her husband, lay on the ground, its head resting in the woman's lap. She was wailing loudly and was soliciting help from all present passerbys for the proper performance of funeral rites for her departed husband. She had been sitting with the corpse in such a way that the narrow path leading to the ghat was quite blocked. The acharya waited a while. It was getting quite late for his bath, and there was no other path leading to the ghat. He had therefore to ask the sorrowing woman, "Mother, if you will remove the corpse to one side of the path, we can move to the river." So you can't step over a dead corpse or touch it. It was sort of the traditional rules and so forth. The woman seemed to be so overwhelmed with grief that she could not pay any attention to his words. On being repeatedly requested for the removal of the lifeless body to one side of the path, the woman finally stood up and told him, "Why, great soul, why do you not yourself ask the corpse to move aside?" Hearing her words, Shankara told her in a voice choked with compassion, "Mother, you are beside yourself with grief. Can a corpse ever move on its own accord? Has it in itself the needed momentum for moving?" The woman then fixed her gaze on Shankara and spoke, "Why, you are the best of ascetics. You hold that it is the one and only Brahman who is the sole authority of the universe, and Shakti or cosmic power is indifferent. Is this not so? Why should not the corpse then move?" Hearing the woman's utterance, which was pregnant with wisdom, Shankara stood astounded and began to think over the import. Where was that woman now? Where is the corpse? In a thrice everything had receded. What divine sport was this? Shankara's mind was filled with joy. Within and without he experienced the sportive play of the Great Mother, Mahamaya, who is the Adya Shakti of the primal energy. It was because of her glance that earth and heaven throbbed, and bending on his knees, Shankara began to sing praises before that woman to the goddess Bhavani, who is the refuge of the entire universe. O goddess, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, Indra, Chandra, and Surya, or anyone else for that matter, that I have ever known, you are the substratum. I am taking refuge at the feet. Thou art my soul's shelter, my only heaven. Mother Bhavani, I have surrendered myself to thee. In debate, danger, error, in alien hands, in water or fire, on hills, among foes, in forests, you protect me everywhere and in all places. Thou alone art my sheet anchor. Thou alone my only refuge and security. He now realized that the Goddess Supreme, this dispenser of boons, who was worshipped by Lord of the universe himself, had out of her grace made himself become aware of her existence and being through this woman. She it was, he understood, the creator, preserver, and destroyer of the universe, and it was she again that bestowed material abundance and final salvation to all embodied souls. He finished his bath at the ghat, came back to his residence. His mode of thought and pattern of behavior now underwent a revolutionary change. He had experienced that the individual soul, the jiva, and the infinite soul, Brahman, were identical and non-different. He understood that the attributeless Brahman was just a witness, a mere spectator and no more. The authorship of the universe was that of the primal energy, the Adya Shakti. So, with that fine story of his first vision of Divine Mother, amidst this Advaitic, high-minded Advaitic atmosphere, we can close our first half, come back and have some more teachings. I wanted to show you the 8 strata of enlightenment he talks about in his scripture, as well as read a few more stories from his life. Jai Shri Guru Shankara Acharya Ki Jai.